Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. Once again, welcome. You are on the Awakening and Consciousness Tribune. So, this is the headline of international news. French President Emmanuel Macron has dealt with a very hot issue. Yes, he has dealt with a very hot issue, and all the European leaders have dealt with a very hot issue. They are feeling the heat. So, they know that in Kursk, there are NATO officers who are surrounded. And this gives Vladimir Putin great strength. A very great strength. That is to say, those who thought they would enter negotiations from a position of strength are now the ones entering from a position of weakness. A true position of weakness. Since they did not expect to be so surrounded in the Kursk region. That's why President Donald Trump picked up his phone and called to plead for their release. But the conditions set by President Vladimir Putin, those conditions did not please them. They did not like it at all. And at the moment, in fact, it's very tense for the Ukrainians and NATO members who are in Kursk. So there it is. Emmanuel Macron, very agitated, has just made a statement where he insists outright. He insists on the deployment of a European force in Ukraine right after the signing of the ceasefire, with or without Russia's consent. Emmanuel Macron would like NATO to send its troops to Ukraine to, as they say, monitor the ceasefire agreement without the consent of Russia. And he has his arguments. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the context of this video conference, that's what we are going to talk about. But I ask you, before continuing, I humbly ask you to share this video conference. Share it as much as possible in all possible groups. Share it as much as you can. Give it a lot of likes and don't forget to subscribe. There you go. You know, when you put a lot of interactions, you leave comments, it gives strength to the video. If you don't have a specific comment, just write, "Hello, the Samurai." Or you can write, "Daring is already winning." So, let's dive into the depths. We are talking about the French President Emmanuel Macron, who is very agitated. Emmanuel Macron therefore aligns himself with the argument that Ukraine is sovereign. And in the name of its sovereignty, Ukraine can bring any type of army onto its territory. So, let's go. Let's get the ceasefire with Vladimir Putin. Then let's deploy along the Russian border European soldiers to monitor Russia. But in appearance, in form, let's say they are there to monitor the observance of the ceasefire. This is the reason why, until now, Putin refuses to respond to the ceasefire request. Since March 11th, they have reached this agreement. On March 12, 2025, an American delegation went to Moscow. Until now, Russia is still considering. What does Emmanuel Macron say? Let's see that. He says that if Ukraine asks allied forces to be on its territory, it is not up to Russia to accept or not. It is not up to Russia to accept or not. Ukraine is sovereign. So, Emmanuel Macron continues. He says, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, has already declared that he will not submit to the Western NATO. He will not submit to the Western NATO and set conditions for the cessation of hostilities. This is what pains Emmanuel Macron when Putin says he will not submit to the West. But what does he want? Putin is not obliged to submit to the West. He doesn't need to. Russia is a sovereign state. But the problem that led to the Russo-Ukrainian conflict is obviously the fact that the desire to expand NATO to Ukraine is part of, it's one of the knots of the problem. So Emmanuel Macron says that Ukraine certainly does not need Russia's acceptance before sending soldiers to its territory. Russia considers the deployment of these soldiers on that territory as a provocation, a declaration of war. That's one. Secondly, when you want to move towards peace, you want to sign a ceasefire, you are not going to say that no, we will make such and such a decision, whether the adversary likes it or not, as long as you are in negotiation. When we talk about negotiation, you combine efforts. Each party makes concessions. Russia will say this. The other party will say that. You make concessions, but you don't impose on the other party, whether they want it or not. We will do it. That's why Russia hasn't responded yet. They went to Jeddah. Normally, a Russian delegation should be invited. They released the famous ceasefire project. And then, that's what they want to impose on Russia. Russia will not accept it. Even if it does accept, it will say, well, modify this part, modify that part. But in Zelensky's mind, in the mind of Kate Starmer, in Emmanuel Macron's mind, what was achieved in Jeddah must be imposed on Russia, and Russia must ipso facto accept it. That's it. That's their thinking. Unfortunately for them, it does not solve the problem. It does not solve the problem. And Emmanuel Macron is on all fronts talking about this situation. He only talks about that. Yes, and then he insists. However, this idea of wanting to send ground troops to monitor the ceasefire is an idea to which Russia is severely opposed. We said it here yesterday. Moreover, it is this very idea that is delaying the signing of the ceasefire. You haven't even yet obtained the ceasefire. You are trying to appease Vladimir Putin to get him to agree to the ceasefire. And it is you who are creating the problems you want to impose on Russia after the ceasefire is signed. Do you think Russia will agree to sign such a ceasefire? No, it will be difficult. Russia will therefore set its conditions. Non-negotiable conditions. If you do not agree with them, the conflict continues. Since Donald Trump himself acknowledged and told Zelensky, you should avoid clashing with someone stronger than you. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is the headline news. Please share it as much as possible. Share it as much as possible. I will return with more news. This was the voice of your one and only samurai.